Okay, so we will start the presentation now. Today's webinar is about the new housing measures in Portugal. As you all probably know, there has been a lot of debate around this topic and a lot of discussion. The Portuguese government has issued a number of measurements in order to fight the increasing prices and the rental crisis that Portugal is currently facing. So our real estate costs have went up drastically, and the rental market is in very short supply, which is leading to a drastic increase in prices. And so the government has issued a package of measures in order to try and combat these issues. And here we will be answering a bit of what is happening. So what has been issued, what has been approved, what is undergoing approval, how all of this is affecting buyers, investors, tenants, and visas, and how this is affecting the real estate market. So for those of you who don't know, we are Savicat Realty. Savicat Realty is a relocation and investment company that supports expats in relocating to Portugal. We act as a guide providing local insight and unbiased support to buyers, investors, and future tenants looking to settle in our beautiful country. And we work in the whole country providing tailored lifestyle services, helping you find the right place for you and get settled right after the first try without getting lost in the way. Our values are based on transparency and technical knowledge, providing the best customer-oriented services. This here in the picture is most of the current Savicat team. Ugo was on vacation when we had this event, so he wasn't present. And our lovely Katia doesn't like to show up on pictures, so she didn't show up on the frame. But she was there too. So today's topics are about the measures. Wait. I just need to relocate the videos here. So first thing we will be explaining is how new measures are approved in Portugal. So how new laws are issued. So you know a bit of the process and where we are on that process. The next thing that we will be explaining is what new measures have actually been approved at this point. And do keep in mind that this is an undergoing process. So some of them are under revision right now and may be approved soon, or they may not be approved. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the ones that aren't approved yet. And we will be talking to you about what has been proposed, but not yet approved. We are also going to go over what the current situation with the Golden Visa is. The Golden Visa is actually the ARI program, so the Authorization of Residence for Investment program. And we are also going to talk about what changes are being made to long-term rentals, what restrictions are imposed to short-term rentals, and short-term rentals here stand as holiday rentals or alojamento local. I will also explain the difference between short-term rentals and long-term rentals in Portugal. And at last, we are going to explain the incentives to construction and rehabilitation that our government is trying to approve. And at the end, we are going to have an open discussion on how all of this is affecting the real estate market. There are some things that are already happening, but of course, we don't have a crystal ball in order to tell you exactly what's going to happen. At the end, this is going to be a presentation of about an hour. And at the end, we're going to have 15 to 30 minutes for questions. So the first topic is going to be mostly presented or at least corrected by Ugo here, because this is more of his specialty. But I tried to present here a simplified version of how the laws are approved here in Portugal. So there are two relevant types of laws that are going to be mentioned here. There are more types of law, but on the current program, only these two are being issued. So it's the decree law and the normal law. The decree law undergoes a simpler process and it's easier to approve. Ugo can explain a bit of how that works and give a bit more detail after I go over the steps here for the regular laws. So for the regular laws, the first thing that happens is that the draft, the presentation, has to be made to Parliament by a government or Parliament member official. And, oh, there's a typo there. As a report has to be subjected to a specialized committee report. And only after that report, it is followed by a debate and a general vote on the Parliament. This discussion can also be made open to public, where public entities and citizens can participate. And this has been the case in most of the proposals made in this package. They have been open to public debate. After this phase, final text is submitted to be voted article by article, and it is then approved by majority and signed by the President of the Assembly and sent to the President of the Republic. Of course, if this is not approved, the law goes back and has to be redrafted, or it's just trashed, so to say. It just doesn't move forward at all. In case that a law is moved forward from Parliament to the President of the Republic, it can be vetoed by the President of the Republic if it is considered to be unconstitutional, either by the President or the Constitutional Court, in which case the decrees must be corrected and reapproved on Assembly. The Assembly can actually also approve the vetoed law if over 2/3 of the members vote in favor that the law stays the same, even though it is unconstitutional, which is quite concerning. I actually wasn't aware of this fact if it wasn't for Ugo telling me. So once it is officialized by the President, it becomes an official law. The official law is sent to be signed by the Prime Minister. And once it is signed by the Prime Minister, the law is published in Diário da República. Diário da República, so I'm already speaking half Portuguese, half English. And Ugo can give you a bit more insight of what's the difference between decrees and laws, and decree laws and laws, and correct anything that I might said incorrectly.
Okay, so most of Anna said was correct. I just want to make a small adjustment, maybe due to the way of translating the information, it might have created some doubts, but while the law can be vetoed by the President, the President can either veto it, or he can also send it to the Constitutional Court if he thinks the law is unconstitutional, which is quite interesting because our current President, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, is a constitutionalist. He's a university professor, so he's specialized in that area. But anyways, he can send it to the Constitutional Court. If the Constitutional Court says it isn't unconstitutional, we have no problems. It just goes back to the Assembly. The fact of the 2/3 applies truly to the veto. So if the President says he doesn't like the law like it is, if he asks for changes, normally he gives it back to the Assembly with some notes. He says, I want this to be corrected and all this, but if by some reason the Assembly doesn't agree with him, if they can get 2/3 of the Parliament, um, it passes anyway. He needs to promulgate it and to officialize the law. So this is the only thing that was slightly wrong, but the rest is all okay. Just regarding the decree law, it's quite a bit different in the way that it's issued only by the by the by the government, by the state. So the parliament doesn't need any interference. Only if they think it needs to be reviewed, they can review it, but it's not mandatory. So the council of ministers gets together, they create the law, then it is signed by the prime ministers and the ministers, and then it goes to the prime minister for the same effect, normally, if he vetoes the law or not. So the way of procedure is the same after, but it doesn't have the intervention of the parliament of the Assembly of the Republic. Be wary that law and decree law have the same value in terms of law. They are equal. They are also both published in the Diário da República.
So this leaves us to the next step, that is what is actually approved so far. And the truth is, only 2 decree laws have been approved as today's date. And it is the Decree Law 20B of 2023 that was released on the 22nd of March. And it's basically a rent support. It covers tenants who verify an effort rate above 35%. And an effort rate is something that both banks and the states in Portugal use to determine the level of effort that a household is making in order to make household payments. And this applies both to rent and to loans. So basically the way that this is calculated is that the total income of the household, and for household, any earning person on that household is accounted for these calculations. That means if there are 2 spouses that are employed, both their incomes will account for the household income. If there are, for example, a daughter and a son is working, they also both count. So no matter the constitution of the household, anyone that is earning within that household will be accounted for the effort rates. And for a household to be considered, it is usually people that have their address in the same house. And in case of minors, they are usually associated to the parent and are automatically within the parent household. So this being said, the total household of the family is the 100%. And for Portuguese law and for Portuguese procedures, the recommendable effort rate is to be under 35%. So for the rent or for the monthly installment of the credit, or forgot the word now, but for the household credit, it has to be under 35%. Nowadays, banks don't approve over 35%. However, when it comes to rent, the government has no control whether or not they approve rents, even if they are over these effort rates. And the reality for a big majority of the Portuguese households is that the amount of the rent is above this value. So what this law decree is doing is that it is giving an income support to those that have rentals, that they pay a rent above 35% of the income household. The household, yeah, I said it right. So this also has a limit regarding how much you earn. So this household, if this household earns more than 38,622 euros annually, they will not be eligible for this support. However, if they are under this and they pay 35% or more, the state will give a subsidiary based on the amount that they are paying over. I don't know the amounts right now. I don't know if Hugo has them with them.
It's not fixed yet.
It's not fixed yet. There we go. So this only applies for contracts that are celebrated until the 15th of March 2023, which is a bit odd, but it is what it is. It's not like people that got rentals after won't need support, but it is what it is. And the same thing also applies to borrowers, so house credits, house loans. If they are over a certain amount, and there is also another support that is due to the credit inflation that has happened recently. There is also a law decree that supports the state covers part of the interest rate when it is above a certain amount or a certain increase. So those are some of the supports that have been issued. Once again, this only applies to purchases or to contracts made before the 15th of March 2023. The second law decree that was approved, it's the 21A that was issued on the 28th of March. And it is a subsidiary for families that are considered very poor. And I don't know if they already issued the conditions to be considered very poor, but
I can give some of them after.
But basically they pay 30 euros monthly per family aggregate and 15 euros per child. So if the family aggregate has one child, it receives 45 euros. And if it has two children, it receives 60 euros, and so on and so forth. And this is per month. There are no other laws that have been approved thus far. All the remaining laws are still on the draft law phase and are still subject to change. We will go over them and tell you what has been proposed, but none of this is final.
Yeah, I would like to add that in that decree law 21A that we are speaking now, the 30 euros and 15 euros, the very poor, we would consider somebody who earns the subsidy. We have called a rendimento mínimo mensal garantido, which is a minimum wage guaranteed, minimum monthly wage guaranteed. It's a very low amount of money, or you receive a pension of old age, a small pension. You are unemployed. So those are some of the requirements where such decree law is going to be applied. Of course, each case will have to be analyzed by the Social Security, and then they will make the transfers for the bonds of the corresponding people. Regarding why are these laws approved and not the others, because of what I explained before. These are decree laws, much easier and much simpler way of procedure. The other laws are subjected to parliament analysis, general verification. Then they verify the law by article, and then after that it needs to be signed by the president of the assembly of the parliament. Then it goes to the if everything is all right, it goes to the president. Then president can veto it or send it to the constitutional court. So it's still something that takes quite a while. So that's why there are still proposals. They entered last week in the parliament, if I'm not mistaken. They were saying in the 5th of April that they would enter a few days later. So I believe they have entered last week, maybe beginning of this week. So it's still in the very initial phase, early stage, and also it's like Anna said correctly, it's subjected to change because the parliament will discuss it, and then the president can also intervene in the end if he so wishes.
So the next thing we will be mentioning is the proposals that are currently being discussed. What exactly is the main topics of this new housing package that the government has issued? One of the things you probably all know, and one of the biggest reasons for international concern, was the announcement of the ending of the Golden Visa program. This announcement was made very loudly, but in truth, nothing is yet approved. And we will go over that in more details in a bit. Another thing that was proposed is support systems for tenants and landlords and the simplification of legal proceedings. In my opinion, especially the second part is extremely important. One of the biggest problems here in Portugal is how long the legal systems take. And one of the things that makes landlords very worried and very unwilling to rent is exactly the fear of the time constraint on legal procedures. So if this part is actually accomplished, it would be a great positive change to the Portuguese rental market. The next thing they are proposing is incentives to investment on long-term rental. So a number of tax reductions, both for regular long-term rentals and for those that are investing on rehabilitation and construction that is destined for long-term rentals. We will also be going over the specifics in a bit. There is also proposals for limitations and extra tax on short-term rentals, and short-term rentals being holiday rentals / alojamento local, also known as AL. There are measures that are very controversial to force renting unused property. We will also explain what exactly was proposed. It's actually not as bad as it initially sounded. There is also measures for forced rehabilitation of ruins, which I can fully understand the value of, but as someone that owns a lot of ruins is very concerning. And the simplification of rehabilitation licensing. I'm also curious how this will go, because it could be very interesting, but it does come with some concerning factors. And there are even other incentives besides the ones that are already approved in order to support young adults and low-income households to rent and purchase property. So the first thing we are going to talk about is the very desired topic of what is happening to the Golden Visa. So this has been the panic of the last month, and honestly, very rightly so. When the first announcement was made, I was very skeptic that this was going to move forward. But the government has been quite adamant that announcing that this is their intent. But the proposal that was made is flawed in a lot of ways. And in general, everyone that I've been consulting with, lawyers and other people on the field, don't feel positively about this proposal at all. And we all have concerns and doubts whether or not this will be moving forward. So why is this proposal very concerning? The first thing that makes this proposal extremely concerning is that it prevents the renewal of those that are already on the program, because the way that the ARA visa, the Golden Visa, works is that when you first apply, you get a year. And then after a year, you renew it for 2 years and another 2 years. So you have to renew it 3 times until you can ask for residency after 5 years. And this is general for all visas. After 5 years in any visa, you can apply for residency. So there are quite a lot of people that have initiated the golden visa process quite a while ago, and the government is proposing that if those people that has already initiated the program way before these alterations were made want to renew their visa, their property, the property that they purchased through the golden visa program, has to be as personal use or as a long-term rental. It cannot be a short-term, an AL rental. And I'm not sure about the business property, because I believe that has not been specified on the law that was proposed. Another thing that is very concerning is that they are proposing converting the new golden visa emission. So also for context, the golden visas have been extremely delayed. We have clients that have asked for the golden visa in 2021 and are still waiting for a final approval. And they fall within this category, which would be very concerning, which means anyone that hasn't got their actually golden visa permit yet, the certificate, they may be issued, if these go forward, they may be issued a different type of visa. And its different type of visa actually has very different characteristics than the one they applied for. So this is the two reasons why most people are very concerned about this proposal. And I still believe it's unlikely that this moves forward. And if this does move forward, I believe that the people that applied to the golden visa will most likely take the state to the courts, and they probably will have a good chance of winning. A lot of people are also very concerned about whether or not this is going to affect other visas. There is absolutely no proposal so far to change the other types of visas. So there is no indication that any further changes are going to be made to the visas. The golden visa is being targeted as a lot of people use it as the reason for the inflation of the housing market in Portugal. So it ends up being the I don't remember how the expression is in English right now, but we call it bode expiatório.
Scapegoat.
Yeah, it ended being the scapegoat for the inflation of prices in Portugal. And although I believe it definitely is one of the factors, the visa itself is not the main culprit, in my opinion. I believe the big problem is the way the real estate market itself operates. And of course, the fact that Portugal is extremely attractive to foreigners and provides a great quality of life and security is not going to change. So the interest of people coming to Portugal and obtaining visas is not going to change. So in my personal opinion, I don't believe that ending the golden visa is going to end this problem. It may temporarily hold it down, but I don't think these measures is going to have much of a long-term effect. Either way, I don't know, Ugo, if you want to add anything about this topic.
I would like to add just a few things in complementation, complementing what you said. So, for example, on the first dot where it says it prevents renewal of the program unless the holder has the property as personal use or long-term rental. Unfortunately, I have a bit worse news. So they renew it, but not as golden visa. They renew it as investment visa, which is a startup visa. So it's a bit worse. It's even a bit worse. But that's what they are proposing. We are in the draft law phase. The golden visa. Most people don't forget we have a socialist was a socialist government. PS means Partido Socialista, Socialist Party, and they have quite an aversion to people with money. But even so, I do comply in one part, that is many properties of Golden Visa are just used for the entry of Europe and going to Hong Kong, and not Hong Kong, sorry, going to Macau, many Chinese, for example. So I do understand what they mean, because the property is just left abandoned. So I understand why they said you have to use it or rent it, which means you have to take care of it. I understand the idea. I don't believe the execution is the best. I don't believe it's a good idea to give expectations to somebody and then cut the expectations at the end. That's why most probably the RE, the people that have RE, will go to court against the state if this happens. And fortunately, most people that use Golden Visa, money is not an object, so the state will have quite a few proceedings against them if this goes this way, because don't forget, this is a draft law. It's subjected to change or not even approval, for example. That's
Yeah.
it.
I do partially agree with you. I do believe that a lot of people that get the Golden Visa leave the property in a big part unused. One of the biggest advantage of the Golden Visa is exactly the fact that they can get the permit and only stay in the country for 15 days per year. Although a lot of Golden Visa users do rent the properties that they purchase for Golden Visa purposes, a lot of them keep them as personal use, and you only use them as holiday homes. But once again, holiday homes, it's, as we both know, a very common thing in Portugal either
Yes,
way.
and if it's holiday home, it's if it's holiday home,
It's personal
um,
use, basically.
yeah, it's that part will have to be clarified by the state. It has to be clarified, because they say personal use. So if it's a holiday home, it's personal use, isn't it? So
Yeah.
are they saying only if you don't visit the house 2 years or 1 year? What you don't have a
Well,
water
I
contract?
believe
What do they
that,
mean by that? See, what I mean
yeah,
is, what do they mean by that? So
I
they have to
believe
clarify
that
that.
the same rules will apply that as the proposal that they are having for coercive rental. It's probably going to be the same logic, but no certainty on
Yeah,
that.
this is just conjecture. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we'll have to see what comes on the law. But basically, this is what's happening to the Golden Visa. They want to end it. Also, do you have, is the slide below also Golden Visa related?
No, I
Okay,
would just
so
like to mention also that this proposal is one of the things that has been creating the most panic on the market, and is the main reason that a lot of investors are pulling out of deals or waiting out on deals, because this proposal, the way that it was made, it is breaking the investors' trust. It's pretty much biting the hands that feeds them, and it is having a very negative impact on the market thus far. Most things are, they are still moving, but they are moving slower. And most people, I think a lot of people in general, even those that are not Golden Visa related, are taking a step back to see what happens, because this measure is very concerning.
yeah, I would just like to add that because it was announced, the ending of Golden Visa was announced in 16th February 2023. The state will have the law to be the state no. So the law is prepared. So the state proposed the law, it will be discussed, to have retroactive effects until the 16th February 2023.
Yeah.
So it means any request done after this date, it's if this law goes through, it's nulled. I can tell you about personal experience. When you ask for a Golden Visa, they don't. When you submit it, normally it should issue a reference for payment, and it's not issuing the reference. So they are already cutting it through other means.
They are freezing all the golden visas at the moment.
Yep.
Hello everyone, I'm just adding a small note to this video as new information has come out since it has been released. The government has indeed, as we have discussed in this webinar, not moved forward with the initial plan for the golden visa, and just today it has been announced that they proposed a new law project with maintaining the initial regulations and conditions of those who have applied for the visa previously, which is of course the most sensible thing to do. And I believe that this announcement was mostly a political move to gain votes by our government party, because they want to say to the people that they tried everything to end the golden visa and they weren't allowed. So I do believe that this political move was a terrible one, and it broke trust very drastically for investors, and trust is hard to gain and easy to lose. So I believe that our government was playing with fire and made a terrible decision in making this announcement. They have, as predicted, not moved forward with it, but the damage was made. So let's see how things progress and how our market is affected by this decision. This law project is once again not final. It has been presented, but it still hasn't been approved, although the current government does have the majority. So it's likely that the current proposal moves forward, and although there is no guarantee that will be the case.
Okay, so on lighter news and much more positive ones, the next measures that are being proposed for the government are the long-term rental supports. And in general, I do think that they are quite attractive. So the first thing that they proposed is a tax reduction for contracts that are between 5 and 10 years, and this is duration of contract, not the time of the contract made, I believe, right, Hugo?
Yeah. What does this mean is, so it's a contract that its duration is for at least 5 years. So for example, 1st of February 2020, 1st February 2025.
So only after 5 years you will be getting that reduced rate. And for those of us Portuguese people...
No. So you submit the contract, and the state checks it's a 5-year contract, then gives you the rate. Just be wary that the tax at the moment is 28%. So they are reducing the tax of all rental contracts from 28 to 25. Then from this 25, it applies these reductions on is correctly speaking of.
Yeah, so between 5 and 10 years, it goes down from 25 to 15, so that's a 10% reduction. Then between 10 and 20 years, it goes from 15 to 10, and then over 20 years, it is reduced to 5%. Once again, I would like to confirm that this applies not only to the duration of the contract made, but also to the duration of the contract running. So if you have a contract that was initially made as, let's say, 2 years, if you keep it running for 10 years, you will get the reduced amount equivalent to that period.
Yes. That is something that will have to be clarified in the law. That is something that is not in the law. On the proposal, they don't have that clarified still. I do believe, by the reading, by the way that they have done it, I do believe they mean the contract itself. So for you to have a right of 10% discount in the rate, the contract has to be for 5 years. But we'll see what comes on the contract. But by the way, they are discussing it because if they want you to do long-term rentals, So if you do 2 years on 2 years on 2 years, that's not a long-term rental for the state. So long-term rental is 5 years. So by my understanding of what normally how they do things, I do believe they say 5 years. They say the contract has to be 5 years duration. I don't believe you'll have the discount if it goes on 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. But I'm not sure, so we'll see when it.
Yeah,
when
I
it
do
comes out.
hope that's not the case, because
Yes, I
if
do
that's
hope as
the
well.
case, it's actually not that positive, because for those of you who don't know, here in Portugal for long-term rentals, the tenants have mandatorily to stay for 1/4 of the contract, plus give a warning of 3 months before they leave. So for a 1-year contract, it means you have to stay 6 months on the property. And for a 5-year contract, it means almost a year and a half, and so on and so forth, which means it's very binding for both sides and very uncomfortable for most people. Of course, some people are looking for that long-term guarantee, but in my personal experience, I believe most people don't want such a long-term binding.
Let's hope you are right, Anna. we will have to see what comes out of
Unless
the
those that
legislators.
are already on the property for a long term, which is a whole other issue.
Yeah.
So the next proposed measure is a reduction to 6% VAT for construction and rehabilitation works that are mainly allocated to long-term rental. This is a great measure, in my opinion. The regular rate is 23%, so it's a very drastic reduction. And for someone that also works with investors, I know that this measure will be extremely well received, and I already know of a few clients that will be very happy if this moves forward.
Just be wary of the following. Sorry for interrupting, Anna.
Go ahead.
All those points before, so 6% VAT, exemption for 3 years, all of them are adjointed, are together with the accessible housing support program, which means it's accessible.
It only applies
rent.
if you go under that program.
Yeah,
so,
if you go under that program and you create accessible rental. Okay, so it's not for every construction. For luxury, for example, not the case. Okay.
Yes, but that makes sense, I believe.
Yes.
Because one of the biggest costs is exactly the rehabilitation and construction, and costs have been up drastically. So in order to provide accessible rental, you do have to have some kind of advantage. So the next proposal is to have an exemption for 3 years of the municipal tax, the IMI, after acquisition or rehabilitation, if once again assigned to the affordable housing program. And it may apply up to another 5 years. These measures are actually very similar to the urban rehabilitation measures, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. VAT reduction. When you rehabilitate a house, you get the DMT back. It's very similar. Let's say if they say exception or return, we'll see. Because when you do an ARU, when you do rehabilitation in a historic area, you get the DMT back, and they're saying exemption.
Yeah, and you also get the VAT reduction.
Yeah. So I do believe it's good, because Portugal has had quite a surge of luxury building. I'm in the Algarve, and
I think it's a good measure to revert the trend, or try to at least
to try to stabilize it a bit, let's say.
Yeah. So on that account, the next proposal is exemption of MIMT, once again very similar to the urban rehabilitation incentives, and once again it is on acquisition or purchase for rehabilitation or construction for affordable housing purposes. The exemption of IMI as long as they are on the affordable housing program, and this means that even if you didn't do the rehabilitation of construction yourself, if you are within the program, you do get the exemption anyway. And also exemption of the stamp tax for leases and properties destined for the accessible housing program.
Yes, because in Portugal you pay 10% of the value of the rental when you register a contract in the finanças.
And this is one of the reasons people don't like to make too short-term contracts. This is actually a good time to explain a bit of how short-term and long-term contracts work. So for long-term contracts, they technically have to be over 6 months. You can make them for between 3 and 6 months with a special condition, saying that it is for temporary work or another special condition. However, most people don't like to do long-term rentals within this type because they will be paying the 10% of the rent value no matter the duration of the contract. So most long-term rentals don't like to do it for less than 1 year. Also because long-term rentals, the people that do long-term rentals, they don't want to have a lot of maintenance problems and a lot of tenant scouting. So they do prefer to have a longer term release, although the long duration is concerning because of the changes of the market and the fact that long-term leases are kind of frozen. It's very hard to increase them unless you restart a contract.
Yes, it's we have quite a in Portugal we have quite a tenant protective law. Yeah. Which each one of the reasons we have a lack of rentals, and also because of the prices, of course.
Yeah. The next topic is also still within this long-term rental supports. So the affordable housing program is a program to help people to get rental prices compatible with their earnings, with the guarantee of payment by the state to the landlord in the rents not collecting during the process. And this only happens after entering the new Balcão Único de Arrendamento. That is a new public organization that is going to be created in order to facilitate rental processes. And Hugo can tell you a bit more about how the affordable housing program works.
Yes, so this program is still it's updated every time. It's an agreement between state and it's an agreement between the state and the landlord. The state helps find the tenant and then gives some guarantees in order for the maintenance of the contract. So while it doesn't help on any reparations, it does help finding you the tenant. It does help in the case the tenant doesn't pay. It serves after 3 months of the tenant not paying. The state protects the landlord, saying that, okay, he doesn't pay, I pay you. And then what does the state do? The state either continues paying it and asks the money later to the tenant through legal means, or other means, or if his social situation is really bad, you can also find another place for him to give the landlord an opportunity of finding someone who pays. So that's basically what matters to this presentation we are doing. That's basically the most important part. The Balcão Único de Arrendamento it's going to be a new entity that is together between Balcão Nacional de Arrendamento and the SIMP, which is another similar entity, and they'll put them together to simplify and to make things supposedly quicker. Let's hope that that works.
I do really hope that this works. Actually, one of the big issues right now is that the waiting list for public housing is ridiculous in pretty much everywhere. So basically, when you are trying to get a house by the state, usually the waiting list is something like 3 years. And it basically the state puts the landlords, the private landlords, in a position that they become social security, because they cannot take tenants that are paying ridiculous rents out of their property. and the state doesn't provide them with housing either. So this is one of the big reasons that landlords in Portugal are very uncomfortable with the risk of rental. Thankfully, this only applies for contracts that are over 20 years and the tenant is over 65 years of age. But it still happens a lot more than a lot of you may think. And to give you an idea, I have family property where people are paying 17 euros per month for one-bedroom units in the center of Porto. So, and this happens a way lot more than anyone may think. So the next thing is, once again, protecting tenants with older leases. Someone that is a landlord in situations like that, it's not very fortunate. As I was saying, we become the social security, which is not our job, but it is what it is. The next measure is to rent to sub-rent, which I honestly didn't understand too well. So Ugu, if you could explain.
Okay, I will do the following. I will explain a bit the previous one and also this one. So the protecting tenants with other leases, this means either tenancies before 1990, okay, so very old tenancies that have not transitioned to the NRAW. The NRAW is the new, somewhat new. It's from 95. So the new law of rental. So new, let me think it in English, new urban law, let's say. Basically,
yeah,
it's
new
like
urban rental law.
Yeah, new urban rental law is a good translation. So that is the new law, okay? So new law. So in a measure strangely against landlords, because they want to defend landlords, but at the same time they take some things away, and they are prohibiting the transition of these contracts to the NRAW, because what that means is when you transfer something to the new urban rental law, it means that you will need to discuss with the tenant the new wage, the new rental amount, and then you discuss with him, and if he cannot pay, the landlord needs to pay him an amount for him to go away. So now they are saying no, now that is not possible, and
which I don't like.
Yes, it's not good. It's not good.
Which means I need to get those problems solved before that happens.
Yes, but I do have not. It's not that bad, because the state will ensure fair compensation to the landlord. Now, the way it's being calculated, the way that it's being calculated, they are doing studies to understand what is a fair. They asked a few studies, and the studies are underway. So this law is supposed to only be in force in January 2024. Okay, so
I have some time.
Okay, so the rent to sub-rent. Now, this is this is quite an interesting law. So basically, you have a house which is available to rent, but you don't do anything to it because you don't wish to. The state comes to you and says, "Look, your house is good to rent. Can I rent it for you?" And then you get and then I pay you an amount, and then I sub-rent it. So the state rents the house. The state is the tenant of the house, let's say, and then he subtenants. He puts some subtenants there. So then the subtenants pay a rent to the state, which is the tenant, and then the state pays to you.
But supposedly the rent that the tenants pay may be less than the rent that the state pays to the actual owner.
Yes. So imagine the state might pay more to you than they pay to the state. That will be most certainly the case. So imagine you get 1,000 euros for the rent by the state. Maybe the people pay 300, maybe just.
I think the difference won't be that great, maybe 700.
Maybe 700. Okay, maybe, yeah. So basically, this applies to middle class households. The loan amount can only reach from the state to the person can only reach the 35%
of the actual value.
Or no, of the earnings. So
yeah. Once again, the effort rate. Yeah.
Effort rate. So and the IRU is the entity that regulates the urban renting and urban rehabilitation. The IRU will discuss with the landlords regarding the price to pay, which cannot be more than 30% higher than the rates the PAA gives. So the PAA has a rate for 1 year, the rental amount, let's say, because
basically the rent amounts are
a bit higher. You can get a bit more. It depends on the municipality. It depends.
But let's see how accurate that is within the actual market, because cities like Porto and Lisbon, the current practice rent amounts are mind-blowing. So let's see what they actually set. But all of these measures are mostly for Portuguese people, and
middle class people or poor people
can't really take advantage of them. But one of the measures that is actually very good and can be very positive for foreigners is that the tenant now can register the rental contract in finances, which is something that could not happen before. And personally, for me and my clients, it was often a source of headaches, as landlords often tried not to register the contract in order not to pay taxes, and people that need visas need the contracts registered. So this is a very positive factor, and this is going to scare a lot of landlords, as a lot of landlords don't register the contracts. And now the tenant being able to do so, they will be forced to pay taxes on the rentals. And I'm curious to see how that will affect the market.
Yes, I would like to add just one more thing. The rent to sub-rent has the minimum duration of 3 years. Regarding this registration, it has to be done after the period the landlord has to register, which is 2 months. So the tenant is there for 2 months. If the landlord doesn't register, then you can register.
Yeah, but it's still a pretty good measure, I think. I'm very curious to see what
it's one of the best.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah,
it's one of the best.
Yeah, so the next thing has already been fairly mentioned, is the fair rent guarantee in new contracts. Basically, there will be tabulated amounts. I'm curious to see how they will enforce that, because they can only enforce that for the affordable rental contracts. For private contracts, they cannot control what people ask for their houses.
Yes, this is something that will have to be it'll have to be really well written. Also, this fair rent guarantee is the duration is 7 years, counting from its publication. It's not permanent; it's for 7 years.
Let's see what happens. The next measure is also one of the most controversial ones, the mobilization of vacant properties for more than 2 years for rent. And this has generated panic in a lot of places. And I confess I was also very worried when it came out. But I then read the proposal, and it's not nearly as bad as it sounded. So vacation houses and houses that are being used for short-term personal use do not count for this. And it only applies to houses that have not been used at all, and also don't have like water and utility contracts in them. So it's really for ruins.
Don't have, or they have no billing, for example. It can have, but if it can have a contract, but it has no billing, for example.
Yeah. But yes, now that I've seen that measure, it's a lot fairer than I thought it would be, because it truly just applies for things that are completely unused, and only after 2 years.
Yes, only after 2 years of them checking that it's like that, then they can use them, of course.
Yeah. And they can
normally
force the rehabilitation. After the forced rehabilitation, they do provide incentives for that, though, for the forced rehabilitation. I believe that the state can also take over to rehabilitate the property. And for the forced rental, I don't think it was fully defined yet. They just mentioned it in the proposal.
Well, yeah, these vacant properties, yeah. So yeah, and it's funny because of course the state will not rehabilitate the property, so he will only do this to properties that are good to rent. So if the property is in ruins or in really bad shape,
or that the owners actually are willing to take the incentives and rehabilitate the properties themselves.
Exactly, for example, yeah.
Okay, so we are almost at the end and it's already 6 p.m. So if anyone needs to ask any questions, because we are a bit late, there's only 3 slides missing. And if anyone needs to ask any questions because they need to leave earlier, you can tell us in the chat and we will open for that. If not, we will finish these 3 slides and open again at the end. Well, no one is coming forward, so we will continue for now. So the other thing that raised a lot of eyebrows and made a lot of concerns is the changes to the alojamento local, which means holiday rentals. So alojamento local is the other rental regime here in Portugal, and it is basically holiday rentals. When you license a property under alojamento local, it basically becomes a lodging, and it is registered as such. You have to comply with a number of measurements in order to a number of things in order to have that license. One of them is to have safety measures. Another one, for example, you can't have gas in that property for safety reasons too. And once you get the license, you can rent it through alojamento local policies. And AL allows you to rent for any duration. It can be for a day, it can be for a year. There is no limitation of the duration of AL contracts. Well, it's not contracts in this case, it's agreements. It basically functions like a hotel would. They provide you with receipts. And I got lost now. But anyway, the proposals to the alojamento local has been very concerning to the bigger cities. The great influx of properties asking for alojamento local has been driving locals away from the city centers. And so most of the proposals consist on suspension and reappraisal of licenses. So this means that new license in certain areas will not be allowed, and this will be analyzed by each town hall individually, and it mostly doesn't apply for the low density areas, mostly for high density areas. And it can also appraise current licenses that haven't been used and revoke them. It also allows for condominiums and private property owners in the same building as the AL to ask for the license to be revoked. This actually has already happened in the past. I guess they took inspiration on that. And the expiration of license that haven't been used. It also has a proposal to facilitate the conversion of properties in alojamento local regime back to long-term lease regime. This is actually something that was quite complicated to do, and they did make some facilitations during COVID, but those were temporary. Up until now, if you wanted to reconvert, you would have to pay
Capital gains.
Yeah, capital gains, and they hurt. So most people didn't want to do that. And they are proposing a simplified means of conversion back to long-term lease.
Yeah.
And the last thing they are proposing regarding the alojamento local that is making a lot of people very concerned is the extraordinary contribution on local lodging. They have not yet proposed an exact amount. I've seen 20% somewhere, but I don't know 20% of what.
It's 20%. Yes, it's
is it of
20%.
profits? Is it of what?
No, it's a 20% in let's say in the earnings of the company. So it most probably will be used in the IRS, in the IRC.
But 20% of the billing is
yes, it's quite a lot.
completely impossible.
Yeah, that's
basically
20%.
killing alojamento local, because if it was 20% of the profit, well, I would still think it was high, but it was acceptable.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see what they say when the law comes out. But they say it's 20%, but then it can fluctuate depending on the operating income, the evolution of rents. So it'll be considered. Don't forget, when you do the IRC or the IRS, you can put expenses for the local accommodation. So they consider that. But yes, it's a way of them saying, look, local accommodation is not worth it anymore. Go back to rental. Basically, that's what they want to do. Yeah. And I can even let you on a secret, which is not, but we have in Portugal planning for this year 250 hotels to be built. Yeah. Which some of them have already been built. So some people are saying there's some lobbying from the hotel business, because as you can imagine, local accommodation extracts.
Well, I think it's two very different things. I think the problem has been that local accommodation has been matching hotels in pricing, which I personally don't believe it's very fair, because as someone that has developed a hotel project, I know how tight the licensing and the requirements for hotels are.
Very tight. It's quite difficult to make good profit in hotels.
Alojamento local doesn't have half of the requirements, and then they charge almost the same amount. And I do think that's not fair. But the origins of alojamento local and Airbnb was to be cheaper than hotels. It's just,
which is not the case anymore.
It is the case on high end, but honestly they end up being price matched. So I can understand a bit of where this is coming from, but I don't think that if it's 20% of the billing, it's completely unethical.
No, it should be. When I say the IRC, it includes also the expenses of the company, which you can deduct in the IRC.
It's not the billing; it's the
declared. It's the IRC. The IRC declaration.
It's already deducting the expenses. Okay.
Yes.
But still, it's a bit high. I think 20% of the profits would still be a lot, but would be fairer.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and that money is to go to our IRU, which is that Institute of Rehabilitation and Rental, for them to finance
in rehabilitation.
Why not
rehabilitation and fair rent
and accessible housing policies.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all that was proposed for alojamento local. And then the remaining measures were incentives to construction and rehabilitation. Once again, we have the EMT exception for acquisition for resale. They did have a strange measure on the resale, because before you could acquire property for resale and you would have this happen within 3 years, which honestly rehabilitations usually take 1 to 2 years, but for some reason they want to shorten this period for a year, which I find a bit odd, because rehabilitations are usually not that fast.
It's sorry for the expression, it's just stupid.
It's just stupid. It's just silly.
It's silly.
So the next thing is change rustic property to construction or urban type property. Construction and urban type property are the same. Urban is the official designation. And this only applies to rural property that is on the edge of urban property or within a urban location. And they can it is only enforced by town hall, I believe, so it's not like they will do it randomly. And once again, it is a bit like the 2-year thing, so they will do that in the property that isn't being used, and they can like take over to build. I don't believe this will be particularly used, but we will see what it does.
Yeah, it's an interesting measure, honestly. If you have a rustic property means a property that is used for agriculture. So if you have a part of land that is lost in the middle of cities, it can certainly be used to build something there because it's there not doing anything. So it's not a bad idea.
There is definitely rural property that is classified as rural, but it's not good agricultural land.
True.
So it is actually would be a lot more useful if it was urban. So I do think this can be interesting.
Yes, it's not a bad measure, honestly. Not a bad one.
The next measure is if you sell the property to the state, you are exempt of capital gains payment in the IRS declaration, with the following exceptions: capital gains realized by residents in the tax domicile in a country, territory, or region subject to a more favorable tax regime, which means a tax haven. And gains arising from the exercise of the right of preference, which I do believe this second one is a bit ironic, because basically if the state forces you to sell to them, you get capital gains anyway.
Yeah, look, I agree with you 100%. They are saying then if you use a right of look it doesn't
it's kind of contradictory. Like, yeah, okay, you get the exemption if you sell to us, but not if we make you sell to us.
Yeah, okay. But the problem, yeah, it's
really silly.
It's not, because in Portugal, when you sell something, if it's in an area, namely ARU, which is rehabilitation area, or high density area, the state has preference on the sale, right of preference, okay? And the state has to buy for the same price you are buying. And if and why wouldn't you have an exemption from the capital gains just because you didn't sell it to the state directly? That is it's really not a good reasoning for me, but we'll see.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So the next measure is the urbanistic simplex. And this is scheduled to be announced further on the 27th of April. So that's about 2 weeks from now. Let's see what they say. It is supposed to be creating a more rapid and effective licensing, mobilization of property of land for housing, and the simplification of the transaction of buildings for rehabilitation without requiring a license. I do think that this measure can be quite interesting because licensing processes are extremely slow.
Yeah.
But it comes with a risk, as the verification by the state is going to be a lot lighter, and if the professionals doing this rehabilitation do not comply with the measures, probably things will still be stuck in the government and processes once they find out. So yeah, if the professionals do it all right, it probably will be a great measures. But for the professionals that try and do things that they can't, which is a very Portuguese thing, it may go badly.
Yeah, they have a really good, let's see how it is implemented. Basically, they want to, the departments of urbanistic, the urban departments, if they don't comply, and other departments, if they don't comply with the times in accordance to the law, they will have a penalty that will be deducted on the next budget for their for their municipality. So let's see if this makes things go a bit faster, because we could we could improve that quite a lot in Portugal.
Yeah, and part of the measure, I don't know if it's this one or another one, but basically they were going to put the responsibility in the private architects and engineers, partially at least. And yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes.
Yes, so in case they are trying to make it a bit quicker, let's say. We had that a few years ago with the, just quickly, with the earthquake, with the earthquake, before we had fiscal people, people that checked the properties, but now we have a declaration saying that the builder declares by his owner and so on that the construction is well built. And of course,
Yeah,
he's responsible.
Let's see how it goes. I do hope it goes well. Oh, there was an error on this image for some reason. The prettiest part is cut out. But yes, now is the time that most of you have been waiting for. That is, how is all of this affecting the real estate market in Portugal? So as of right now, it is what I've mentioned. There is a lot of insecurity in the parts of investors. I have been, me and a lot of people on the area have been feeling a dry out. Basically, people are stepping back to see what happens. Some of them are waiting for prices to go down. Others are just investors that are worried about the issued measures and don't want to proceed until they have security. A lot of people are pulling out for deals and big deals. I've heard of a lot of people that pulled out of millions deals because of this proposal. So right now you don't see drastic effect on the property pricing. But if this does go on for a long time, and if they do take a long time to give more clarity on these measures, it will probably affect the market negatively. And once again, it will depend a lot on what is actually approved. Because I believe if the measure for the golden visas moves forward, a lot of investors will just move out of Portugal. And that probably will make the price drop a bit on the market. I don't believe most of these measures will affect the private house owning market. So those that are looking to buy for private use. I do believe right now it is affecting a bit because people are just waiting to see what happens and trying to get better rates. So a lot of people are just waiting a bit. So my crystal ball moment is pretty much, if the measure goes forward, I do believe that there will be a slowdown, not a full crash, but a drop on the Portuguese market. And if the measure is approved differently in a more fair way, I do believe that the market will keep being fairly stable. I hope that the prices don't keep rising because honestly, they have risen enough. But the interest in Portugal is definitely not decreasing. So that's one of the reasons I don't believe there will be a full crash. There is also a lot of concerns around the credits and the fact that a huge percentage of the Portuguese people have variable rate mortgages. And some of them are increasingly becoming in a very tight spot due to the drastic increase on their monthly installments.
95%.
Yeah, I think the people that are most at risk are the middle income people. So those that had a fairly high installment amount that now that it doubles, it goes, let's say, from 1,000 to 2,000. And it's not like you just can find €1,000 somewhere. Well, most of the mortgages in Portugal are actually fairly low value. I did see the numbers from the Bank of Portugal. If I remember correctly, 80-something% or very close to 80% of the mortgages were under 400 or €450 in a monthly value, which means even if they're double, it's not, most people find a way, they do nights, they take a part-time job and they find a way to keep afloat. But on the higher tier, it's going to be the one that is the most affected, but it's not the majority of the market. So even though there will likely be some repossessions, and the banks are saying that for 3 years now, so we don't know when they're actually coming. But I do believe they will eventually come, but they will not be enough to crash the market. So that is my personal opinion on the state of the market. I don't know, Hugo, if you want to share your own opinion.
No, your opinion. I agree with your opinion. I would just add that this is quite different from 2008's crash. The big difference being the amount of loans, the amount of the loan, let's say. So before we had quite, in 2008, our market was extremely inflated. But a big problem was people asked more loan than what they needed. So if the house was worth 100,000 euros, they asked 150. So that was one of the big causes of such a big crash. This way, because we have the effort rates, we have the evaluations, everything is much more controlled now. So that's why we're not feeling it that much in comparison to 2008. So while there will have to be certainly at any time a market correction, it won't crash. In my honest opinion, it won't crash really strongly like it did before. But it certainly needs a correction. That is true. That is true.
And I do agree. So this is basically what we were going to go over. I'm just going to leave here our last slide. For those of you who don't know, SavvyCat can help you with relocation and buying. We have buying packages that include a number of services in order to support people moving to Portugal and get settled in the best way. This includes basically concierge services, support with getting the bank account, getting the networking done, getting the services you need, getting your kids registered in school, finding the right cities, finding the right neighborhood, and of course verifying everything for purchasing property. We do house inspections, and Hugo and my other collaborating lawyer Joanna do review everything legal, so you have the least risk possible when working with us. We also provide rental services. This is once again from a buyer / in this case tenant perspective, and we pretty much act as a concierge and help you scout and verify, both from a physical and legal perspective. We also have investment and advisory services. So we will help investors understand the return on investment and the time frames, and also do project management and networking for projects developed. This includes rehabilitations and big and small constructions. You can reach out to us at contact@savvycatrealty.com, and you can check all the information about our services, and we are very transparent. You will be able to find all the conditions and pricing on our website in www.savvycatrealty.com. And now we will finally open to questions. We did have some questions sent over by email by when the submission was made. I do believe a big part of them was answered during this presentation, but Hugo, if there is any of them missing, do provide with the answer. I don't have them in front of me right now.
I have them. I can.
Sorry, let me just answer Clint Jones here. So, boa tarde, Clint. And yes, we will emailing this recording of this meeting to everyone that subscribed, and probably later in our newsletter too. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, as Anna said correctly, most of them has already been answered, I believe. I would just start in order by Mr. Glenn Baug. This one, he says he wants to use RE, so Golden Visa, to start. So sorry, Mr. Glenn Baug, but it's not possible anymore. It won't be possible anymore.
Well, depends on how this goes forward, but it doesn't seem very likely.
No, I wouldn't. It doesn't. By my honest opinion, by one way or the other, it's gonna end. So at least maybe the ones that have the processes until the 16th of February, they will still be processed due to the fact that they have requested the visa. But after that date, it's, in my honest opinion, it's not worth it. It's not worth the risk and the hassle, because asking RE is quite difficult in terms of documentation. You need a lot of documentation. It's very expensive, much more expensive than a D7. So maybe a D7, we are happy to help you, of course, but maybe a D7 can be the best for you. We can help you with that.
And if you don't have passive income, you can go for the digital nomad visa. It does have the short-term and long-term variations. So it pretty much works the same as the D7, except it is for active income earners. And it does have a much higher income requirement, being that 2,800 euros per month.
Okay. So, Mr. Colin Kigley, what will be the restrictions or not on offering short-term rentals? So we have, if we are talking about local accommodation, I do believe we have explained it. If you do a rental contract, not a local accommodation, there are basically no changes. If you're doing a local accommodation, then you have all these changes we have explained in the presentation, which are not very good, honestly, for making a local accommodation. Regarding Mr. Han or Han van de Ven. So will real estate prices drop in the future? I do believe Anna has answered that. So is it better to wait a while for a price drop before investing again in Portugal? It's hard to say. I think Anna was quite specific.
We don't have a crystal ball. We can tell, but everyone is waiting on the government.
Yeah, at some day it will happen. Now it's hard to know. It's when will the bubble pop? So, Mr. Maurice Palumbo, so we want to learn about more the future of long-term rentals. We have also explained it in the presentation, I believe. And Mr. Paul Subrian, yes, interested in learning about the habitual program. Sorry, but I don't understand.
It's the non-habitual resident program. Yeah, we can explain a bit of it.
Yeah, the non-habitual resident, of course, we can explain it better by certainly Anna can help with that. But basically, is a program that makes you come to Portugal with your own means, and then you are obliged to stay in Portugal around 180 days per year, and you will have tax cut in your IRS. So you do the IRS in Portugal, and you pay a fixed rate independently of what you earn, because in Portugal we have brackets for the earnings, so we go up to 48%.
A lot of taxes.
Yes, we have until 48%. 48%.
Yes, it hurts a lot.
Yes, it hurts a lot. So the non-habitual resident program, it's good because this way you can avoid the double taxation in both countries, and you can divide your stay within Portugal and your country of origin much simply in terms of in fiscal terms, of course, which is the most important.
Yes, there are a number of advantages to the non-habitual tax regime. The biggest one is, of course, the tax reductions on income earned mostly outside of Portugal, although there are also reductions for income earned in Portugal. And there is facilitation on inheritance and remittance of funds. And this program lasts up to 10 years. So it is very advantageous And I believe that the flat rate is 20%. It's
yes,
maximum.
20% maximum. Yeah.
So that is independently of how much you earn. So it can be very, very good for people coming from countries where the taxation is higher, which I believe it's most of the countries.
True. So we have Mrs. Phyllis McLuhan. Do you anticipate other immigration programs changing, specifically the D7? I don't, because the one that the state believes that has influenced more the rental is not the D7, but truly the golden visa, because of the high amounts of the purchase and sale of the houses. So because everybody needs at least 500,000 euros or 350,000 plus building. That's a very high amount for Portugal, and that makes all prices around going up, because people, of course, want to make more money, so they sell it to the golden visa. So, Mr. Roy Hutchinson, I have not relocated to Portugal yet as a UAE citizen, because I hear the real estate prices are prohibitive for rental and purchase. Do you have a forecast on prices and on the availability of long-term residential loan?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, Anna, please.
Yeah, so the issue in the rental market is exactly supply and demand. We went over the reasons for this problem happening. So basically, the owners don't feel safe renting their houses, and the ones that do charge very high amounts, because there is an even higher demand, which of course leads to very high prices. But as usual, the places where you have the most demand is where you will have the higher prices. Lisbon being the biggest culprit. The Lisbon rental prices are scary. Are just scary. Porto has risen drastically in the past 2 years, but it's still a lot better than Lisbon. However, if you go to smaller locations, the Algarve, it's also not too recommendable because of holiday rentals. Most people want to short-term let because they have a lot more profit with vacation rentals. So there is very little offer on long-term rentals on the market, which once again leads to the same problem. But on smaller locations, and especially interior locations, you will be able to find very affordable prices. It, of course, also depends on your demands. If you want a modern house with all the amenities and air conditioning and all kinds of insulations and heating and everything, then you probably will pay a premium price. Probably that premium price will be less than in the country you are in, but will still be a premium price. If you have less demands and are willing to negotiate and compromise, then you probably are able to find a very decent priced thing in a less densely populated area. But it's very much about supply and demand. So, and I believe that was all the questions we had?
just one more, Anna.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Mrs. Tanya Kerbs, let's hope I pronounce it well, I hope. So how much can a landlord increase the rent each year? Yes, this is something we didn't speak on it on the presentation, because this is something that the program is not changing. So the only thing that has changed, and it's not in this program, is that the state has defined for 2023 the landlord can only increase the rent for 2% instead of the 4.43. Why is this? Because normally the landlord can increase the rent in proportion to the inflation. So in this case, it should have increased 5.43%. So
however, that was not the
thank
case.
you, Phyllis. So the increase normally, in the case that there is no agreement between the parties, you can also reach an agreement regarding the amounts. If there are no agreements between the parties, normally the landlord can only increase the rent in proportion of the inflation, which, for example, in 2022, it was negative, so it means it didn't go up. For 2021, sorry, 2022, it went up 4 euros in 1,000 years, so it was 0.43%. This year it was supposed to go up 5%, but the state artificially defined the increase for 2%. So this is calculated in accordance to the consumer price index, which is checked by the National Institute of Statistics, the Portuguese one, and that's how the rents are increased.
But
unless of course you agree. For example, one year you pay an amount, second year you pay a bit more, 1,000, 1,500, for example. So
overall, the tenant is very protected,
yes,
and it's very hard to increase rent unless you restart a contract, which is one of the reasons that landlords don't like loan contracts.
Yeah, it's true. Because imagine this way, the market is going up so fast that if you do a 5-year contract, in the end of the 5 years, you would have lost thousands of euros, because the property you could have been renting for more 300 euros per month than you were renting it for 1,000 euros, for example, and you could have rented it for 1,300. So it's much a fact of supply and demand. And honestly, Anna can confirm, because she's a landlord. Being a landlord in Portugal, let's hope it's going to be a bit better now. But because people don't want to rent their houses, naturally the offer is not there. So what the state needs to do is create, for example, measures like this, maybe a bit more, to make people to want to rent their houses. Because if people don't want to rent their houses, there are no houses to rent. And like Anna said very well,
happening.
Yeah, and like Anna said very well, in the Algarve we have a special problem which you don't have most of the other areas in Portugal, which is the summer renting. So most people in like 4 months get more money than in the rest of the year. So they prefer to rent just for 6 months, 8 months, and then the other 4 months they kick the person out, and then they put in a rental, Airbnb, something like that. So basically, this is it. Yeah. So these are big challenges the state has to tackle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have here a message from Phyllis saying "Obrigada." This was amazing. Thank you. And Hugo, you pronounced my surname perfectly, which is rare. We'll be there in about 10 days for our first scouting trip, and we will be looking forward to maybe grab a coffee.
Thank you very much, Phyllis, for the compliment.
And if no one else has any further questions for us, this will be it for today. Turns up that we are only 10 minutes late, for it wasn't that bad. And I hope that all of this was informative and clarifying. And once again, you can reach out to us anytime. The information is here on the slide. And we hope to see you in Portugal someday.
Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon or morning, wherever in the world you are.
Wherever you are.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.